Welcome to the Security Weekly News wrap-up show for the week of 23 May 2021. Nobelium returns. Bezos, the Devourer of worlds. Doug rants about cryptocurrency and more on this Security Weekly News wrap-up show. Stick around.
This is Security Weekly. For security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. Cybercriminals are working overtime. They're leveraging activity around the COVID vaccine to disguise phishing attacks, hoping to steal money or personal information from your employees or customers. The Barracuda Email Threat Scanner is a free tool you can use right now to help protect your business and ultimately your reputation. The Barracuda Email Threat Scanner analyzes your Office 365 accounts and identifies malicious emails that slip past your gateway and into inboxes. Find the cybersecurity threats hiding in your Office 365 email. Use the Barracuda Email Threat Scanner for free right now at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. As technology continues to evolve and expand, so have the countless ways our critical systems can be put in jeopardy. Ransomware attacks, misconfiguration, user error, and malicious threat actors, to name a few. As IT infrastructures continue to grow and diversify, how do you ensure stable security? Core Security, a help systems company, provides an analytics-driven, layered approach to security with a portfolio that enables both proactive and reactive responses. With Core Security, you can reduce risk by limiting access, detect upcoming and active threats, test for security weaknesses, and efficiently monitor data for actionable insights. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/core security.
All right, let's wrap up all the show topics of the week. I'm Doug White from Roger Williams University, your host. On Application Security Weekly number 152, John and Mike had Manish Gupta, the CEO and co-founder at Shift Left, on the show. Manish was on to talk about tools, collaboration, and processes that you need to be successful in a modern continuous integration pipeline. So interesting stuff for app development there. On Business Security Weekly number 218, Paul, Jason, and Matt had Chris Hallenbach, the CISO Americas at Tanium. He was on to talk about how people get focused on the patch and putting the patch in, but they forget that by the time they patch, the attackers may well be embedded in the network through other means. I mean, that would be my first step, right? I mean, that would be what I would do, is use that vulnerability to get in, disguise your access, and make sure you have other ways to get back into that system later. So, and then when everybody's focused on patching, you've got, even if they patch and they go, oh, whew, we're all done. So, be aware. Just the other day, my daughter noticed a username in one of my systems that was Benny Gesserit. If you don't get that, well, too bad. And she asked about it. And, if the day comes when I can't make a Dune joke, I'm going to quit. But anyway, so, she noticed that was the username I put in there because I use that for certain things, not trying to control the universe or the fate of all humanity or anything like that. But it's just, basically so I can bind LDAP. Yeah, that kind of stuff. In the second segment, CISOs struggle to cope with mounting job stress, corporate compliance strategies to protect data, cybersecurity metrics matter, and of course, lots of other stories. On Enterprise Security Weekly 229, Adrian, Paul, and Tyler Shields had Nathan Hunstadt, the principal security engineer and researcher at Code 42, on to talk about SIEM tools. I always say SIM tools, and how they aren't so great. I have an acronym pronunciation problem. They go on to talk about how SOAR, which is a lot easier to pronounce than SIM, how SOAR platforms and how they may well replace SIMs. Very, very interesting to watch. This is something that I was quite, when I saw the topic, I was like, I really want to see what they have to say about this. So you should check that one out. Especially if you're building SOCs or you're looking at tools like that. In the second segment, Drew Rose, the CISO and founder at Living Security, along with Ganesh Pai, the CEO and founder at Upticks, joined the crew to talk about something near and dear to my heart: why your phishing program isn't working, with a focus on metrics, training, and culture. I have sat through so many anti-phishing training animations this year, and I call them animations because they're usually those little things like, what would you do? What should Phil do now? And I don't really feel like my skills to resist or not resist really changed from watching all these vignettes and, scenarios. And here's another example. And I haven't been phished. So, but I wasn't phished before I took all the training either. Coincidence? I think not. But I do have issues with all this. I don't know if it's effective because companies keep getting phished and people keep getting phished. So it does the training. Anyway, it's an interesting segment. And in the third segment, they had the news. On Security and Compliance Weekly number 74, Jeff, Josh, Liam, and Scott were talking with Alan Friedman, the Director of Cybersecurity Initiatives at National Telecommunication Information Administration, which is located at the U.S. Department of Commerce. They were primarily talking about SBOM. And SBOM, to me, is a newish acronym. And every time I hear it, I go, what is that? An SBOM? But it stands for the Software Bill of Materials, which when I hear that, I go, oh, that, yeah. This is a big new deal that has been going on based on an executive order from President Joe Biden and others to actually require that we find out what is in the software that we are using. This is a result of SolarWinds. In the second segment, they continue discussing this, as you might expect. On the Security Weekly News, number 121, Fleming Shee was from Barracuda Networks and joined me to talk about the increasing threat surface we're all facing in the coming years due to, pretty much everything becoming a threat vector. So we had a nice conversation, well worth watching if you missed that one. On Paul's Security Weekly number 696 last night, Paul Batista, the CEO and founder at Polarity.io, was the guest. The segment was about how training is critical, but it is difficult to find time to do the traditional week in Frankfurt type of boot camps that I used to teach. I've seen that change I used to teach week-long boot camps. A lot of you have probably taken boot camps of some sort. Maybe you've taken mine. I don't know. But I taught a lot of boot camps for CISSP, CCNA, CCE, other stuff down through the years in a lot of different places. People flew in. They spent the week somewhere. And that sort of changed. And it is tough to find time to take a whole week now. And, in fact, I had the same problem last year. I was going to do a boot camp. I was going to take the boot camp. And I was just like, when am I going to do this? It's like I got to be here on Tuesday and here on Friday, and I need to be there on Thursday night. And, it was just kind of challenging. In the second segment, Rick Howard, the CISO at the CyberWire, was on to announce the Cybersecurity Canon Committee Hall of Winners for 2021. I didn't get my prize, guys. You might want to call me. It must be in the mail. I haven't heard from you yet. And in the third segment, they, of course, had the security news. My favorite threat of the week, I promised I was going to rant about this. My favorite threat of the week is going to be cryptocurrency. And I know. So look, I love the idea of cryptocurrency. Don't get me wrong. I mean, a Bitcoin has pretty much the same legitimacy as a euro, right? I mean, a piece of paper with a picture of Europa on it, which is on a 20 euro note, doesn't mean anything. I mean, is that any more valid than some hash? I mean, it's still just a thing. It's a token. You can't trade the paper for gold. I mean, and don't even bother to try unless, I guess you could buy gold, but you can't say this piece of paper is worth some amount of gold theoretically. You can't, and unless the seller is willing to accept the piece of paper or the token, then it has no value at all. And in fact, despite efforts of currency makers to prevent it, you can still forge banknotes, and people do all the time. So in some ways, a cryptocurrency is better than a banknote. Many of the worries about crypto are the same worries as banknotes, though. If you lose them, or you hand them to a guy named Mitch who says he can get you a nice Les Paul for $50 and walks down an avenue off 28th Street, never to be seen again, is kind of the same problem. Right? I mean, people kept telling me crypto is dangerous, crypto is a problem. And I'm like, yeah, but so is cash. I mean, if somebody steals your wallet, whether it's a virtual wallet or a physical wallet, your wallet is still stolen. So don't use that as your argument that crypto is risky because it's viable. But there is a key difference. Euros and dollars and yuan and all these other currencies are regulated. Well, sort of. I mean, the countries that represent these currencies do try and manage their value through different techniques. So some countries like China set the value of yuan. Other countries let their currency float, so the value of a dollar versus a euro changes from minute to minute. I know. But cryptocurrencies are having a crisis of identity, though. And in a sense, they aren't really regulated, nor are they controlled, because nobody knows exactly how to do that at this point. I mean, if I start printing banknotes at home tonight with pictures of Jeff Mann on them, and I was thinking Jeff on the 20 and Paul on the 50. Yeah, I mean, you know who's going to be on the 100, right? Yeah, of course. And I take those banknotes down to the store and I say, hey, I want to buy a bottle of scotch with this banknote that's a Paul Asadorian 50. I'm probably going to get laughed out of the room, if not arrested, because there's no validity behind this. But banknotes and other tokens have been around. I mean, this is how all banknotes and tokens came into being ever since prehistory, right? I mean, you had to be able to represent the value of something else. It's sort of, you didn't have to lug around cows with you to trade. So you say, well, this gold coin represents so many cows or whatever. And it's pretty well established today that they're backed by the state. So banknotes anyway. But crypto, what is crypto backed by? Well, nothing. I know. The state's not backing their banknotes either. It's just an illusion. But the state isn't really backing anything, and dollar bills are just a sham, but don't tell anybody, because that's how you end up with pitchforks and torches coming after you. I mean, tell somebody they've been slaving away down at the salt mine for years and years, and those pieces of paper they were given in exchange for losing 3 fingers and a toe, as well as, what do you get in salt mines? You get salty lung, brine foot, and yes, there are salt mines. I've been in a couple. But tell them those pieces of paper are worth nothing, and here come the pitchforks and torches. But crypto's new, and at least relative to banknotes and such. And in the past, often tokens were either had inherent value, so a golden dragon is some amount of gold and a silver stag is some amount of silver, or they were backed by some amount of a valuable substance. But today, banknotes are just paper. They represent some undefined thing that could all evaporate in an instant. But people trust them because of, history. But crypto's young, and it's not clear how or what sort of form it will take in the future. So what if tonight at home I create Larry Coin, a cryptocurrency, and I peg it to, say, euros at 1-to-1? Does it have any real value? No. Not unless somebody will give me a euro for a Larry coin. I can try to get you to give me euros for Larry coins, but maybe not. But if someone does give me some euros and I give them some Larry coin, well, Bob's your uncle and we're in business. So who regulates Larry coin? I do. Idealists and libertarians will tell you that Larry coin is regulated by caveat emptor, or let the buyer beware, and I guess that's absolutely true. But again, unlike banknotes, there's really nobody looking at that right now. Larry coin and Larry coin policy is just whatever I decide that it is. And if I was, say, a billionaire or even a guy with $10,000, which is, I guess, a deca-air, and a Twitter account, I could start manipulating Larry coin and fleecing the shills. I tweet, Larry coin's about to skyrocket. People start clamoring after Larry coin and bidding up the price. Boom, I sell at €2 per Larry coin and double my money. Leave you holding the bag. You're crying, and whilst you gather up your pitchforks and torches and try to burn down my virtual castle, I'm off to my private island. Anyway, I think we're in a place where there's a coming change. I just don't think I know what it is yet. If I figure it out, I will buy a bunch of it before you do. Find out and sail off into the sunset, suckers. All right, and now the news. So Tenable released an advisory this week about vCenter Server, which is the management appliance software for VMware's vSphere. Which is all, of course, the sort of front end to ESXi, which is the thing that what people, when they say VMware, this is usually what they're talking about. 2 CVEs, one of which scored a 9.8 in severity, would allow remote code execution in the vSphere client. So the 9.8 severity problem requires that you be able to access the vCenter server on port 443, which you may well be able to do if you've exposed your vCenter server. And a lot of people do, because this is the management interface. So and you can control that with a lot of granularity. So if you're allowing users to access vCenter Server so that they can create, run, execute, see, or whatever, various VMs, it may well be exposed. So there were 2 other CVEs in February related to VMware, which have all been patched. But this is one of those systems, and I have one of these systems, that is very difficult to patch. It's not something you just decide this afternoon I'm going to hit update. It's a little more involved in that, but it would be advisable to get on it, and VMware is saying, please patch now. 6 different Bluetooth vulnerabilities were disclosed by CERT. They were reporting on the findings by the Agencia Nacional de la Sécurité des Systèmes d'Information. Yeah. The vulnerabilities affect Bluetooth Core and Mesh, which are different specs, but they're widely used by IoT devices. Bottom line, all of those these various CVEs, there were 6 of them that were listed in this article, allow for crafting attacks, which would allow primarily impersonation of a device, either as a connector or a connectee, or allowing you to connect to other devices, which would then allow you to compromise a bunch of legitimate IoT devices. I know that's not really telling you what all these different CVEs do, but they are fully explained in the article, so you can read about all that without trying to take notes while I'm reading this. But the real issue is that most of these are not patched. So Android, Cisco, and others in this article are reporting how they're scrambling to try to release updates, but some of them are saying we have to wait because there's so many components in this supply chain of these IoT devices that it's really difficult to get all this validated. So they have their own patching problem. I think the biggest threat is apparent devices seeming legit and you connecting to something in a public place and then getting your own devices compromised at the same time. So Apple has an issue with their new Mac chip, or do they? According to the headline, it was like, whoa, but the vulnerability has been dubbed M1 Rackles, which I think sort of spells miracles desperately, but it's spelled M1 Rackles or Rackless. Hector Martin discovered the issue and found that it is literally in the firmware of the CPU. This is the brand new Mac CPU called M1. And so that chip apparently has a register on it, which is readable from EL0. So if you aren't up on all your kernel modes, EL0 on a Mac is the sort of equivalent of Ring 3 on like Wintel type stuff, which is to say it's the user level. So this is stuff that users don't really have access to, but this is where computations are done for insecure stuff. And it's called EL0 on a Mac. And that's where you got the name, I guess. The name stands for, in the big book of desperate acronyms, Missing Register Access Controls Leak EL0 State. That's where M1 Rackles comes from. Yeah, sometimes you get desperate for an acronym. But now this register, so this register that's on there can be written to and read from users who are applications that are running in EL0. And so it's actually pretty esoteric. And it was only 2 bits. So he was able to write 2 bits and read those 2 bits from EL0. So, this is... users shouldn't be able to access processor-level registers like this, and maybe somebody will figure out what to do with it. I got sucked into this NerdFest article, so I thought I would make you hear about it too. Is it a big issue? I'm not sure at this point, but it'll be difficult to fix. But Apple has also patched a flaw in Big Sur, which is the macOS version 11.4. Now, that flaw is related to a malware called XCS-Set. Which came out last year, and the flaw itself is in a systems component of the OS called the Transparency, Consent, and Control, which sounds like some kind of complex dating app, but it's actually the management tool for apps on the Mac that manages privilege levels. So this is just where your granularity of how these apps get to execute comes into play. Jamf, which is a Mac management software company, were the ones reporting on this. They said the vulnerability allowed AppleScript utilities with no privilege at all to piggyback onto an already installed app that had greater privilege. So basically, you could cause your script to execute with some other script's privilege level. So what does this XCS set do? Well, it grabs screenshots, was its primary purpose of what is on the screen. So obviously, if you've got a script running that watches for things like banking apps or other things to open, this becomes part of this, what they call overlay attacks and things like that can grab things off your phone, like your PIN number and such, if it's displayed on the screen. Normally, because those overlay attacks started happening, alerts are triggered when somebody tries to grab screenshots on a phone, but XCS set does not trigger it because it's using this vulnerability to get around the alerting system. So, Apple has patched it, so you know what to do in that regard. In the other patching news, SonicWall is urging their customers to immediately patch they sounded pretty like, please do this, oh my God. Immediately patch their network security manager in multi-tenant firewall management solutions. The flaw is an 8.8 severity, and it does allow command injections without user authentication, which made it sound to me like it ought to be a higher severity. but it was scored as 8.8. This is the latest in a series of 0 days that SonicWall has experienced this year. They've had several different rounds of warning and patching. So if you are using the NSM on-premises solution, they are basically saying patch and patch now and patch often, which we've been saying all along. So if you got that solution, you may want to get it patched up. I get a lot of people asking about places to practice hacking or learning how to hack things, and there have been a lot of them down over the years. The first one I ever think I dealt with was called Third Pig, and they allowed people to contribute servers to this sort of server farm and let people hack them. These are great learning tools, and they're lots of fun, even if you already know how to do some hacking things. Hack the Box and others have been around for quite a while. So Vulnhub, which is what this one is called, is a provider of pre-built Dockers that have vulnerabilities built into them, a la, say, something like Bad Store, which was another one of my favorites, which is a terrible website that has every vulnerability you've ever heard of in, like web coding. But there are a lot of these things, and they've been around a while. I just thought I would mention it. I obviously don't run these Dockers on your production systems, but, they're fun to play around with in the sandbox. Have I Been Pwned is a free website that is a lot of us use to check if a password has been compromised or a username has been compromised in the wild. I assure you, your username has been compromised in the wild. It's that username password combo that really matters, though. It also allows you to see, is it out there? Is it being used out there? And then you obviously should change your password to something that doesn't pop up on Have I Been Pwned. Troy Hunt, the founder of HIBP, announced that it will now be open source and nonprofit. The site already has over 1 billion requests per month from both individuals and automated tools that check the status of the combos and passwords on the fly. Troy filed this. He wants to move all this to open source and nonprofit. He started this last summer, and they announced that they're going to now be getting passwords that are found in FBI investigations as well. The open sourcing should then, mean that new tools will come about, and this will be more widely available and used. It's a great tool. Check it out. Microsoft found the group behind the SolarWinds supply chain attack with a new campaign running. Mystic, which is Microsoft's threat hunting group, started watching this operation in January, and they've called this group Nobelium since the SolarWinds threat. The Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center then saw them doing recon back in January. Mystic reported that on Tuesday of this week, they observed escalation in the effort as Nobelium began a campaign posing as a U.S.-based organization called USAID, and they were distributing emails with a legitimate email address that contains malicious links. They're using a service called Constant Contact, which is a sort of pseudo-legitimate service that can be used to spam things, although, their terms of service would sort of theoretically prevent you from doing that, even though it really kind of doesn't. In the latest contact, 3,000 individual accounts across 150 organizations and 24 countries have been targeted. They pose as the U.S. Agency for International Development, which has a legit email address. The document claims to be an alert with new documents being published by former U.S. President Donald Trump about election fraud. There's a lot of people out there that still believe there was, something going on there. The URL sends you to a Constant Contact service, which has a redirect built into it, and that sends you to the Nobelium infrastructure. You end up with an ISO file. If you click the ISO, the malware then basically installs itself on your system. It creates a Cobalt Strike beacon so that they can find it and grant persistent access to them. I don't think anybody's really talked about what they're doing with these systems yet, but the attacks are continuing to escalate, and I would expect to see more of this coming very soon. So if it's, you may want to advise your users about these kind of emails if you haven't already. And finally, I keep picking on Elon, but I'm going to pick on Jeff this week. But serious, Elon, call me, dude. We should talk. But Amazon announced they would be buying MGM. That's Metro Goldwyn Mayer Studios. With the lion and the whole, roar, all that stuff. They paid $8.45 billion for MGM, which is kind of like me going to Starbucks for, when you're Jeff Bezos. It's like if I went to Starbucks and bought like a large coffee, $8.45 billion for him is kind of like that. The idea, though, is to allow allow Amazon Prime streaming to really bolt on a massive library of films and such that MGM has been producing since back in the early part of the 20th century. They're one of the oldest studios out there. And as these streaming wars begin to evolve, they're getting so complicated. And Amazon wants to be sure they have a major studio in their pocket to compete with all the other streaming services like Paramount Plus and Disney Plus and blah, blah, blah. It really starting to sound like the early cable TV wars. There's so many networks you need to subscribe to that you sometimes feel like I have to subscribe to two different ones just to see all the episodes of Gilligan's Island. I mean, I'm guessing, based on business theory, that the behemoths will slowly devour all the small fry in the sea of entertainment. And that's the news wrap-up for the week of 23 May 2021 in the declining time of plague. Please get your shot. See you next time on Security Weekly News.